Well, hello and good day to you all. My name is Dimitri Frederick, and you're watching Voices for the Voiceless, a Frederick Media production and a subsidiary of Frederick Capital. Today's January the 25th, 2013, and today's show is entitled, Please Check in Your Gun Before Entering the Classroom. That's, please check in your gun before entering the classroom. And today's show is actually going to focus on the recent shootings that's been going on. Our hearts go out to all those who have lost somebody in the recent shootings going on, but also overall, the senseless violence has been taking place in our school systems and now right into the hearts of Americans' youth. Senseless killings has been taking place. So I wanted to dedicate a show. It's a very serious show today we're going to talk about. So hang tight and basically listen to some things that I want you to think about that led to where we are today. And first I want to go out by listing, at least some of the shootings that's taken place in 2012. It's a lot of shootings that's happened, but understand that with the mass media, there's only a certain amount of shooting that's ever even, talked about, publicized, and everything else in between. And there's a lot of other shootings that take place on a day-to-day basis that don't get recognized. As today we are at a point where, we are at the center of our families, where our children are taken away from us at such a young age that now it's getting the media attention that it should have been getting from day one, so that these guns, should be stopped being, made available to those who have access to them. Also you should keep in mind that since the school shootings had started, and this is going back to 1999 of Columbine, there has been about 31 or so school shootings that's taken place, and that's a sad fact. And I'm going to talk about some of the facts that we need to know about what's going on in our youth today with these gun shootings. So without further ado, let's get started. February 27, 2012, 3 students were killed and 3 others were wounded by Thomas Lane, and he went on a rampage. April 2, 2012, a former student, 43-year-old Juan L. Gore, killed 7 people at a university. The shooting was the 6th deadliest shooting massacre in the U.S. at that time. April 6, 2012, 19-year-old Jake England and 32-year-old Alvin Watts shot 5 black men. 3 of them died because of their race relations, or racism was the cause for the death. Senseless, again, violence. On May 29, 2012, Ian Strawicki opened fire and killed 5 people in a cafe. July 20th, 2012, during the midnight premiere of The Dark Knight Rises, 24-year-old James Holmes killed 12 people and wounded 58. As you know, that was a well-publicized case that happened that shook America's give us a wake-up call, you could say, for lack of a better word. August 5th, 2012, 6 Temple members were killed and 4 others were injured by a 40-year-old U.S. Army veteran, Wade Michael Page, when he opened fire on those people. September 27th, 2012, 5 people were shot to death and 3 others were wounded by 36-year-old Andrew England Dinger, because he lost his job and there was no motive other than that. December 11th, 2012, 22-year-old Jacob Tyler Roberts killed 2 people and himself. December 14, 20 children and 6 adults were killed by 20-year-old Adam Lanza, and that's not including his mother that he killed prior to that event. It was this shooting that woke America, and it's also this shooting that actually brought me to want to create a show that also wanted me to actually talk about the whole debate about teachers having guns. People carrying weapons on them, whether or not you're going to be at work, whether or not you're going to be in the school playground, or even now as a teacher. The NRA and other people that's in support of guns are in favor of having people carry guns. And this is what the core of this show is about today. Is it really that necessary? Well, you should also know in the list of that I just read to you, 9 major shootings took place in that year that's legally reported as major events that was publicized. That's just in 2012. The total was 65 people killed and 77 other people were wounded during these shootings that took place. And that was 9 of them reported. Earlier at the top of the show, I said that there were about 31, 32 or so shootings that took place since Columbine, and that's in 1999. So imagine how many other people's lives have been lost in these senseless shootings. So I ask you the question, is it really that easy for teachers to pull the trigger? Is it really that easy in America? Because that's what we are in favor of doing right now. Do you know that it is easier to pull the trigger than deal with the ramification of taking someone else's life? That is what drug dealers, criminals do in the streets. They do not care about your life. You have no value to them. You are either a victim of circumstances or you are the threat that must be eliminated. That's how they see you. Folks, teachers are not prepared to live with the consequences of taking one's life. We are all trained with different God-given talents and skills. That is why we all do different things, different jobs. I myself have a background in IT. I'm a big guy, as you can see, who can hold my own and fight somebody. But asking me to hold a gun, which is something that I'm already against. I don't believe in weapons. I don't believe in having them in my house. So imagine you asking me, who is a man of God as well, to shoot somebody else. That is totally something else that I'm not prepared for, and so is these teachers. Therefore, it's hard to ask anyone to go ahead and start and strap on a gun to themselves and be ready at a simple notice to go and fight for your life and kill somebody else when they wasn't even trained. And I'm not talking about training in the sense of years of training. I'm talking about at a split moment that you have to go defend yourself and be prepared to kill somebody. We're talking about teachers here. Innocent teachers as young as 23 years old to 60 years old, and we want these types of people to show bravery by carrying a gun. The NRA themselves seems to forget that you have to have a certain psyche to even be prepared to shoot somebody. The CEO in his recent interview, wants to name names of trained professionals who carry guns to protect others, like Secret Services, bodyguards, military people, police, etc. All of these people have gone through a mental checklist before getting a gun, before even holding one, even being prepared to take on killing somebody. Not to mention years of preparation on a regular basis. Telling the teachers to just hold the fort just in case there's a school shooting is one thing, and providing them with a day's worth of training is another thing. All of these things don't add up to what actually happens. Imagine a teacher confronting a terrorist, confronting a bully, confronting a mad shooter with bulletproof armor, heavy equipped to go into war basically, which is what that person would be. And here's a teacher with a gun, holding it in front of this person and confronting them and saying, stop right there. Could you imagine that person shaking, terrified, because now they're in a real situation? We all know that being in a classroom environment, being taught versus dealing with real life situations, because we probably will say, you know what, that will never happen in my school. If you recall one of the testimonies of the father who had his son died in that Sandy Hook shooting, elementary shooting, he said, which really touched me, that it wouldn't happen in a million years. He told his son about a shooting that recently took place on television that he saw. And here he was trusting in God, trusting in the school system, trusting in just the sanity of mankind, that nothing like this will ever happen in his backyard. And here he was on national television retelling his story, that he couldn't believe that he told his son just a few days ago, a few weeks ago, I think it was, that will never happen, just to ease his pain, to make him believe and trust that it was safe for him to go back to school. Could you imagine that? So we seem to also forget that killers can smell fear in the person holding a gun, and that's what I was demonstrating about to you. Not to mention that these people are ready to die. That's the one thing. There's a life that's at stake, and you are sitting there in front of someone who's a killer, a madman or mad woman, ready to take their life, ready to take your life even, and you're telling the teacher to go ahead and do that. They have the automatic weapons. Once again, gun lovers can talk all they want about teachers arming themselves, but at the end of the day, that teacher is an unexpected victim in a gunfight. She will have a 6 or 8 rounder bullet of standard handgun that they probably issue. They're not going to carry no massive automatic rifle or automatic shotgun just to say that I'm trained and I'm prepared to defend the school in case something like this happen. What's happened is that you have a handgun fight like the police have, and that's what the police carry themselves. Even they themselves know that they are outnumbered with these people in the streets with these automatic weapons, just a bulletproof to protect them. And so, are we going to also have these teachers carrying a bulletproof vest on them all times? I doubt it, because it all costs money. Because at the end of the day, who's really paying for this? So you're going to arm a bunch of teachers and tell them, go get trained, or is this going to be a school-run program or government-run program? These are things that we don't think about. So imagine now a teacher is licensed, taking time from her or his teachings to spend time on the weekend to also be taking training lessons on carrying a gun, be properly mentally ready, to kill somebody, and also prepare lessons for a Monday. Doesn't make sense. So here's the shooter that's going to be facing this woman, this man, with a semi-automatic weapon. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. And we all know the end results. A scared teacher, all shaking, trying to confront a shooter. And he is strapped with a bulletproof vest and plenty of rounds to make sure that he does not miss. Folks, here's the harsh reality. As of December 27, 2012, there was a report that came out that said a gun group had already trained 200 teachers from Utah to use weapons in school. And the caption goes on to say, you should see the handgun, a small 8-bullet maximum gun. And that's what we're talking about. And this is the kind of gun fight America wants to send their teachers in. Are we not already asking a lot of our teachers? They are underpaid, overworked, fearful for their life now, and we want them to now carry weapons. This brings me to the conclusion of today's show. I want to conclude this show by taking you back to some historical moments in humanity existence that can possibly explain how did we get here. And that's the big question at the end of this show. How did we get to this point right now? And my explanations are in 4 unlikely stories in places that you would not never think about. The first one explanation goes back to thinking about WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. America has a long history of playing both sides to get ahead. We create weapons of mass destruction with no one to buy them, so we sell them off to our allies so they can later on turn on us and do the same and use those same weapons back against us. That's why we're dealing in this war of weapons of mass destruction. We deal with Saddam Hussein, Bin Laden. All of these histories are open books that prove the reality of what we have done that has caused us to where we are today. In the end, we start wars to make a profit and a statement to foreign leaders that we are still the #1 power in the world. It is by far the American way of doing business. The second story goes back to the slave trade. I recently saw the movie Dango, where as they say the D is silent, which reminded me of how it was back when the slaves were slaves, where they were punished, they were treated, like animals, as the Constitution still says, as 3/4 of a person. The ramification of slavery has forced black men to be strangers to their newborn babies. Because back in the slave days, young boys were taken away from their parents at birth. Slave masters breeded African Americans as property to be sold off later on, or to be a workhorse, because some men were very strong and they said, hey, this is a good breed that we could get many years out of them. Therefore, there was a detachment from ever becoming a father, that is, Black Americans, ever becoming a father figure to their own children at birth. Today we see the impact of single-family households. We see kids latching out with violence, gang forming, black and black crime that spills out in the streets and American school systems long before white children were getting shot in the classrooms. All because of an internal self-hatred that slavery started a long time ago. Generations, again, even to this day, are still paying the ultimate price for the color of one's skin. And you see that every day on gun shootings, street violence that's going on. My third example and possible explanation goes back to look at Isaac, the sacrificial lamb. I recently saw a Kristen Amanpour show on ABC about following the roots back to the Holy Land. In her documentary, she talked about how God asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, as a test. If you know the story of Abraham, he did not have a child until he was at least over 100 years old. God had made a promise to him to be the ruler of many nations, but God tested Abraham's loyalty at the same time. But generations later, the radical Muslims/terrorists of the faith have used that as their focal point for spreading hatred and loyalty to their cause. If you are not willing to die for Allah, the merciful, then you are unworthy. Today we see why so many are willing to give it all up for their faith, to prove their loyalty to Allah by becoming suicide bombers. This brings me to the last and final explanation to how we got here. Explanation 4 is the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. Today we hold on to a constitutional belief that says that every man shall bear arms. A bold statement that held true in its time because we never knew when the British were coming. So at any given point in time, the cause had to be ready to bear arms. More than 230 years later, we still hold these words to be relevant when we have formed a civilized union that consists of an army, police officers, and citizens. Today we are no longer at war, but with ourselves. Hence is why you see so many guns in the hands of children today. I am Dimitri Frederick, signing off. You've been watching Voices for the Voiceless. As always, I hope you have been enlightened, empowered, and definitely have been educated. Take care, and God bless.